Tonight we're going to learn things about climate change, we're going to learn about invasive plants, and I know you've probably all bumped into bittersweet and burning bush and some of the other invasives that are out there that are just covering Wellesley especially. I know we bump into that. We have 14 different properties that have been donated to us at the council, and we have it in all the properties. We're trying to get rid of all those invasive plants. We're going to talk about different plants, invasive plants, and also some of the plants that are coming from different continents. We're going to talk about some that have escaped from horticulture, so some of the places that sell the plants, etc. We're going to talk about our gardens and what's impacting all of the different species of birds. And we're going to talk about some of the effects from these different animals coming from overseas to here, as well as some of the different invasive plants. I know you've probably been over to our garden area over in off of Western Road. We have some different invasives that are over there that are going to have to be worked on, because as you know, the monarch butterflies are disappearing, slowly but surely. And some of these plants pose a threat to us because they simulate milkweed, which monarch butterflies reproduce on. And so this is causing us a lot of problem in the habitat. But Peter is going to go into that. So our guest speaker tonight is Peter Alden. He comes from Concord, Massachusetts. He's an author of 15 books. He's got over 3 million copies sold to date. Some of them include the National Audubon Society Field Guide to New England with over 1,000 different animals and plants in full color. I think you have some copies over there, don't you? Okay. Just wave your hand over there anytime. Peter's ran the first biodiversity days with Dr. Edward O. Wilson, was it?
Yes. That
you worked with? And hundreds of the field biologists recording over 2,700 species in a 5-mile area around Walden Pond. Peter organized the first government-sponsored biodiversity weeks in 300 towns in Massachusetts. That was a pretty big undertaking, as a matter of fact. The Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. For 50 years, Peter's led and had lectured all over the world, 300 land tours, safaris, private jet tours, cruises to over 100 countries. Quite a few countries to be in. And all 7 continents and 7 seas. You have your own boat?
No, I work on others.
Oh, okay. Peter has led groups such as the Massachusetts and National Audubon Societies, Harvard Museum of Natural History, overseas adventure travel, Thompson Safaris, National Geographic, Rhodes Scholar, and dozens of cruise lines. He's done a lot of work in all these different countries. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you tonight to Peter Alden.
Thank you all for coming. It's nice to come here at Wellesley. It's not too far away, and I don't take 128 between the hours of 4 and 7. I know the back roads in Western. Anyways, I have spoken here occasionally, not at this library, but to your organization at another facility, I think about 10 years ago. So if I do repeat myself on anything, I apologize. Also, if any of you have a cell phone, please turn it on. There might be an important call from a loved one. If anyone wants to tape my show or take just flash pictures, you're welcome to. I'd be totally honored, etc. You don't hear that ever, do you? You have to do it. Tonight I want to do a little overview of some selected species illustrating some of the issues that have changed here from the time our benchmark in Concord is Henry David Thoreau. He was most active intellectually in the natural world in the 1840s, 1850s. And we sort of compare things from today back then. But even earlier, you know, I've heard rumors that you have a few real estate offices here in Wellesley, right? The total value of real estate in Wellesley about 15,000 years ago was 0. Right? Because we had about the 4th in a row big continental glaciation. You had 2,000 feet of ice over Wellesley. So no matter what the real estate offices of those days were saying, they were nothing. Then, as the ice retreated for the 4th time back up into Canada, and continued northwards. We had here a Arctic tundra climate with no trees, and then that was later followed with some scrub aspen, willow, and a few black spruce for for a number of centuries. And then eventually we had a boreal forest, or taiga, T-A-I-G-A. Then we had, gradually we had mammoths here, we had saber-toothed tigers, we had scimitar-toothed cats, woolly mammoths, mastodons, all sorts of things, woodland caribou, woodland bison, all of them killed by the American Indians, as much as their technology allowed. Their technology, before they got the horse, they were unable to kill off all the buffalo, or they would have been extinct too. But the Indians, American Indians, Native peoples here, have had a tough go of it since the Pilgrims and all the followers came here and so forth. And, but they did kill off everything, even giant sloths. We had all sorts of species of giant sloths running around, different species all over the U.S. They killed every one of them. So I care about the Indians of today, but when I see Chief Seattle crying about, you American Europeans coming over and killing lots of the buffalo, his people killed off, his ancestors killed off everything they're technically allowed to. They even killed off all the cheetahs. We had American cheetahs all over the intermontane West and Upper Great Plains chasing the pronghorn antelopes. But they saw that the pronghorn antelopes could run much faster than the Indians. So then the Indians had to go kill the cheetahs. Just as around here in the woods, we had saber-toothed cat eating all these big mammoths that would have been here if there wasn't a land bridge, no access for the peoples from Siberia. They would have killed all of them, but we had to have problems because the saber-toothed cat and scimitar-toothed cat would kill the Indians, right? So when we had snow up here, they would they'd look for footprints of the saber-toothed cats, and even though they did not have rifles and pistols, they did have spears, they had bows and arrows, and they killed every last one of them. If you don't believe some of that wildlife, they didn't go extinct naturally. It had nothing to do with climate change. Climate change is real, but that's not why those things disappeared. Out in Rochester, New York area, there's a tar pit similar to La Brea out of Los Angeles, where they've got the mammoths, they've got the saber-toothed cat skeletons, and they've got Indian workings, scraping hides and doing whatever they had to do, and spears. So things have changed here before the, quote, Europeans came over and screwed everything up. But the American Indians screwed up everything before we even got here, pretty much. So, I mean, we're both guilty, we're both good. So, in about the 1600s, we had American Indians here, but they had no metal things to, wipe out forests and stuff. They did plant corn, beans, squash, and tomatoes in small plots. But it was woodland with small agricultural plots. But when the Europeans came over here, as our technology evolved and our ability to, things like just saws, metal saws, that we took down the forests of New England. Remember, 90% of all of New England, south of the White Mountains, back in the late 1700s, 1800s, was grassland. It was grasslands, field crops, dairy cattle, some sheep, there were some orchards and so forth, but forests were tiny little plots where after the mosquitoes and the harvest season was over, you went in, you chopped down some trees to heat your house and cook your food in the wintertime and the spring. And that's the only reason there's any woods around Walden Pond. It had the worst soil for agriculture. It was very sandy around there. That's why we had that plot taken there. So things have very much changed. But when you think back to the mid-1800s and that period, we managed to clear this entire forest from here to Omaha, Nebraska, with little patches left in some of the areas they couldn't farm. On top of the mountains had some scrub forest. But there's very little forest here, and there's virtually no virgin forest anywhere in the United States. So we really altered it. So what happened is out in the Great Plains, a lot of the butterflies, the wildflowers, and many of the birds that are adapted to the Midwest Great Plains, open country habitat, maybe with some scattered trees in some areas, they flooded east to Wellesley. And these were things that were not here. They were not here back in the 1600s and before. And most of the money that goes to the Mass Wildlife and, well, the private donations to Mass Audubon and other conservation organizations, but the endangered species of Massachusetts, when you look through that list, it's mainly open country and grassland species, some of which only survive at one place, airports. a whole bunch of these birds. But things were in every single town in Massachusetts, meadowlarks, bobolinks, and all these Great Plains things that flooded east, were what we had here in the 1800s and much of the early 1900s, and now everything's grown back up into forest pretty much, or it's chem lawn or soccer fields or something like that. So most of the money that is spent to save these endangered grassland habitats, birds in particular, I was a bird specialist more than anything, they're not even native to Massachusetts. They just filled in, and then there's little relics as we go away. For those in the back of the room who did not hear me earlier, I didn't say anything important. Okay. Anyways, this is a gentleman from Old Town, Maine, near Bangor, who graces us at the Thoreau Society annual gathering, second weekend in July every year. We have people from several dozen countries descend on Concord. I lead nature walks. We have all sorts of boring talks, if you like boring talks in philosophy. And just a great big party. This gentleman comes down from Maine quite frequently. He's head of the tribe up there. And what did he do in his 20s? What was the main occupation of most Eastern North American Indians? What did they do when they're 20 years old to 30? They washed windows on skyscrapers in New York City. That's what he did. Now he's back with his traditional clothing, with his traditional people. But that's a major industry for many of the Indians. So this is some of the forest of today, where we now have white pines, but we had all these different broadleaves. So we used to have chestnuts until the blight came in. But we've got hickories, oaks, maples, and so forth, and an area's white pine. Now, as we know, there's something called the white-tailed deer, but they eat the saplings of many of these different broadleaf trees, but they hate pines. And because of that white sticky stuff they would get in their teeth and the gums, they want nothing to do with pines. So we're noticing areas in my town in Concord, and I'm sure it's true here in many parts of Wellesley, when you've got some wild areas, that there's an increase in white pines and huckleberries, which are like a blueberry, and the deer don't eat the leaves, they'll eat a few of the berries and so forth. And some of the oaks, the deer are not too happy with. But the deer are becoming a huge problem here, the overpopulation of deer. And it's interesting that Henry David Thoreau never saw a deer. He heard about somebody who knew somebody who saw a deer back in the 1700s in Concord. There were no deer. We now have 400 deer in Concord. They're spreading Lyme disease. They've managed to eat 30% of our wildflowers, which no longer exist in Concord. We think that's a main problem. And they're also the butterflies that depend for their caterpillars on just certain plants, certain wildflowers. Those butterflies are disappearing or gone because of the gross overpopulation of deer. The worst movie ever made, understanding the relationship of carnivores and herbivores, is called what? Bambi. That's a good movie. We need more hunters. Hunters would be banned. If we had one of those referendums that they have around election time on banning hunting, it would pass widely in Massachusetts. There was one in the late mid-90s on banning trapping or making it real difficult to trap, past 70%, 80% to 20%. So the hunters are sweating bullets right now. I get free dental care as long as I say bad things about deer and good things about hunting. No, but I can be bought. I should be a politician. Anyway, so as we settled most of, Eastern North America, cleared the forest and so forth, had little houses and farms, and no electricity. Remember, if you lived here back in Thoreau's day, you had no internet, you had no television, you had no telephone, you had no electricity bills, you didn't have credit cards. I mean, life was great, and nobody was tweeting you, nobody had you on Facebook. Life was delightful back then. Unlike today, or if any of you have taken the train or the subways around Boston, you see all these people with their crackberries, every damn one of them. Nobody talks to anybody anymore. It's amazing. But anyways, we've become more suburban, less reliant on, this is just part of old Sturbridge Village. But we had a lot of open country back then, and things have changed. Now, in that midst of the forest, the only forest in Concord at the time, around Walden, was this gentleman, Henry David Thoreau, who lived in this little replica of a cabin. Well, he lived in a cabin before, which this is a replica. And somewhere around 850,000 people a year come to Walden Pond. 50,000 of them are coming here in reverence to this character, Henry David Thoreau. The other 800,000 are doing number ones in Walden Pond on hot days in the summertime. I could care less about old Henry. But he's an inspiration for a lot of us. And he kept track of when the birds were coming back every spring, what date, over almost 20 years. At the same time, and he knew all his wildflowers. And when did the wildflower come into bloom? And Richard Premack, a professor of botany at Boston University, by the way, why don't they name Boston College a university? It's big enough to be a university. Why don't they merge, you know? Anyways, another subject. But he has found, using a lot of data from Henry's day, intermediate people, and people today, that most of our birds that winter in Latin America, well, Central America, South America, are not coming back a day earlier. But the ones that winter in sort of Mexico, the West Indies, the southeastern U.S., are coming back on average 10 days earlier than they did back just in the mid-1800s. We're also seeing that the wildflowers are coming into bloom about a week or 10 days earlier. And because of Henry, no one was paying him or telling him to make notes meticulously year after year after year, day after day. He'd go to this bog and see if the flower's out, not out, go the next day, not out, go the next day. And it was out, and so forth. And there was no way the smartest computers in the world can match the meticulous record keeping of this gentleman who was not paid one nickel to do what he's doing, did. And we use that as a cornerstone to show what we now term man-accelerated climate change. We know that there's been climate change on our planet's ups and downs, warm and cool periods. As I mentioned, even Sarah could tell you that. But as far as man-accelerated, check Bill McKibben on the internet if you want. We are going to be entering a new carboniferous age. Among the flowers in Concord that he was studying is this one, the cardinal flower. It used to be fairly common, and when I was a kid, there were very few deer in town. But now, with 400, we estimate, deer in town, this thing's disappearing. I only know a couple of spots for us. So as these deer are just going out, there's things they don't like, and there's things they do like, and the things they do like, you can say goodbye to. This is Edward O. Wilson on the left wearing a vest. Bob Durand, who was Secretary of the Environment for a bunch of years, under a number of different... Bob Durand, by the way, you can see part of his face, he's the one who jumped in the Charles River that flows through Wellesley with what former governor? Bill Weld. Because they tried to get the Charles River cleaner and cleaner and cleaner with the Watershed Association and many groups in many towns along the banks. It got clear enough. And so he did jump in with Bill Weld, who some of you may have seen his name recently. He didn't win, by the way, even with a recount. But anyways, this is some of our events that we've done here on biodiversity. I've done two major ones where we invited hundreds of experts from all over the eastern U.S. To come in. And there's been bird counts. We do Christmas bird counts. We have for over 100 years. I run the one in Concord area. Started it when I was a kid in 1960. But no one's ever done sort of biodiversity things. And I've been sick of counting blue jays and crows and pigeons in the wintertime, freezing to death all the time, thinking, why don't we do something in the summertime? You know, there's all kinds of flowers and butterflies and things around and mushrooms and whatever. So I came up with this concept to gather all these people to see how many creatures and plants and mushrooms larger than a millimeter. We had to drop it at some place, so I didn't end up at a hospital trying to see what kind of viruses and bacteria people had. We cut it off at a millimeter. And as was mentioned earlier in the introduction by Pete, we now, in 2 different July 4ths, we used that day because that's the day Henry chose to move into his cabin at Walden. We're at 2,700 identified species of birds, flowers, trees, shrubs, bugs, lichens, and stuff. And it's really interesting running into some of these experts. I mean, I ran into some guy from Connecticut who came up here. Turns out he was single. He wasn't that bad looking, but he said he's single. You know, he just can't seem to get a date. And I said, well, what is your special hobby? Oh, well, I work mainly in slime molds. Somehow, I guess it didn't turn on the women of the earth, and so forth. But it's amazing trying to find experts in beetles, experts in lichens, experts in grasses, experts in underwater life. We have people go down 100 feet to the bottom of Walden Pond looking for cases of stoneflies and stuff. And we've done this several times, and I got involved with the state doing it, and worked for like 3 different Republican governors. But the 4th one fired my butt immediately. As soon as he took the oath of office at 10 in the morning, 10:20, I got a call from Mitt Romney saying, get your crap out of here. And he fired E.O. Wilson, too. Brilliant guy. This is what occurred out in the plains. It used to be a woodland bison that was all over here until the Indians killed them all. But this is the American bison, mistakenly called a buffalo. And, you know, hundreds of millions out in the Great Plains. But notice the birds down at the feet. Those are brown-headed cowbirds. Brown-headed cowbirds evolved with the buffalo, and they mainly were able to feed on insects kicked up by the ever-roving herds of buffalo, which made a problem for them if they had a nest, you know, but the buffalo disappeared. They had a real tough time getting grasshoppers and bugs. So they evolved something where they would drop their eggs in the nests of meadowlarks and bobolinks and other birds out in the Great Plains, let them raise their young, and they will continue on with the buffalo. And that is a very good trivia question. This is the male, the brown-headed cowbird. The female's just all gray, same shape. They don't winter here really, but they do come through in the spring, summer, fall. And it turns out that the female cowbird, we now have evidence, will lay up to 40 eggs a summer. So the males hang out with the females, and she will find a nest, or the male will find the nest and tell a female that's over there. There's a scarlet tanager, there's a rose-breasted grosbeak, there's a yellow warbler, whatever. And the female will go and lay one egg in that nest. And the baby hatches early, bigger than the other ones, and the parents only feed the hungriest chick, right? The one that's pushiest. And so the other ones starve, and then the baby cowbird, even when it's blind, uses its fledgling sort of wings and often ejects the other eggs or the other babies and takes all the food, so that many birds are only feeding and raising the cowbird. This is a wood thrush. Used to be much commoner, but the cowbird is doing quite well now for several reasons. One are the piggeries and feedlots in the southeastern U.S. where they winter. And they go in there and they throw out all the seed and stuff and grass and stuff for the animals. But the cowbirds and the redwings and the grackles are in there eating a lot of it. And then also the bird lovers with their bird feeders down south in the middle Atlantic where they do winter are helping them survive. So the bird watchers are killing the birds they want to see by having bird feeders, and they feed the cowbirds. It's sort of an ironic thing. They've done some studies where 90% of all wood thrush nests that they checked in a big national forest raised only one cowbird. Only 10% of the wood thrushes actually raised wood thrushes. And then they managed to decline. So I like to have really meaningful solutions, such as arming all of the teenagers in Massachusetts and giving them guns and bullets and so forth and various other things to kill all the cowbirds. And I think that would really help the number of our warblers, thrushes, vireos, flycatchers around here. It probably won't pass in the legislature, but it's worth a shot. So some of the other things that have been disappearing here gradually are things like this barn swallow, locally known as the barn swallow. They like eating the bugs coming off of cow and horse and sheep poop on open areas. And it used to be quite common, I remember back in the 1950s. Today it's getting quite scarce. They don't like Camelon. They don't like woods. And we have very few dairy farms left here. It's amazing, with the drought going on for 6 years in California. California is the biggest dairy state, and most of our milk comes from California now, not Vermont. Strange. I don't know how they get the water, but this bird has disappeared. And a lot of the swallows that used to nest in the barns that we had here, in the 1800s, the barns weren't painted. And then somebody came up with the wise idea that barns should be white, or they should be red, and they should be painted. So then they started painting every barn in New England. And the swallow nests of mud and silt and so forth don't stick to paint. They did stick to old weathered barns. And by sprucing up and cleaning up everything, we don't have these birds that eat 1,000 mosquitoes a day, and they're getting quite scarce around here. This is the aforementioned bobolink. If you're not a bird watcher, you've never heard of it. It used to be widespread, and probably in the 1800s, every single town in Massachusetts had bobolinks and meadowlarks. And right now, only a few areas here and there have them. Very big fields. It's really a Midwestern bird. It's probably not native to New England. And the same with this, the meadowlark, which was considered a very common bird in 1950. We didn't start doing atlases with the Mass Audubon Society until, I don't know what it was, 1980s, and we've redone it again since then. And the meadowlark has gone from being in 350 towns to being in maybe 20 towns at all. That's all right now. But it's probably not even a Massachusetts bird. Another species of the open country which came in from the Midwest was probably not here in the 1600s is the American kestrel. And a lot of people are putting out kestrel boxes, but unfortunately many of the kestrels are being eaten by Cooper's hawks, which have come back. The first record of a bird coming to a bird feeder that I can find in the notes of Emerson and Thoreau, etc., in my town, is this bird, the bob white. And this is a female. And this looks like a bird that did not invade from the Great Plains, the Midwest, and to our habitats that we created to resemble the Midwest and the Great Plains. It came up from the south. It lives in tall grass areas with scattered trees. And its normal range is so maybe southern Pennsylvania south, but it came up into New England on its own because of the grasslands that we created with the scattered apple trees, and it felt at home up here. We don't have that habitat much anymore, plus you add the pesticides and so forth, and it has now vanished from Mass. There's a few in Cape Cod and a few in the Vineyard. That's about it, but I think that's a bird that came up from the south and is now retreated. It's having a real tough time because it nests on the ground, and the red fire ants from Argentina, Paraguay, are eating all the young and all the eggs, not so much the eggs, but all the young in the nest, and the bird has crashed about 90%. It's not really a New England bird. Now, with climate change, and I know some of you are climate change deniers, what we really should call man-accelerated climate change, but it looks like right now the American alligator, which was an endangered species for a while, survives up to about Norfolk, Virginia. The predictions are, from many, many scientists, but who would ever believe a scientist, that our climate here in 100 years will probably be very similar to that of the Carolinas. So if you want to protect the birds, the flowers, the trees, and shrubs of Wellesley, Massachusetts 100 years from now, send some money to the Nature Conservancy down in South Carolina, and that is what may be growing up here and living up here, including alligators. We'll probably have alligators up here. Now, if we go back to the Carboniferous age, way, way back, even before the dinosaurs, that was a time when we had very high levels of carbon dioxide up here, and we had a climate that was not really hot, but it was warm and moist all the way to the North Pole, so to speak. It was sort of like the coast of Alaska around Juneau gets no snow at sea level. And the two dominant forms of vegetation today that make up coal from that Carboniferous age was an ancestor of a little plant called the club moss, which we still have here, a princess pine, a ground cedar. They used to be woody trees 100 feet tall, and also tree ferns. There were no magnolias, there was no maples, there were no flowers in the Carboniferous age. And so when we burn this coal, which is far worse than gasoline and petroleum as far as its potential danger to the health of the planet, the big issue is ocean acidification. We don't care about the polar bears. They can survive in the zoo. We can feed them in the zoos, right? No problem. They don't have to go out and suffer eating all those seals, running away from Aleuts and Inuits and so forth. But it's ocean acidification, where the ocean is getting much more acidic because of the coal. So it's burning club moss and tree ferns from 400 million years ago, roughly. There's causing potential sterilization of the ocean, and that's far more important than the drowning of Miami. Who cares about Miami? And we can put, who's got a friend that can afford to live in Miami? The oceans may rise as much as 200 feet. It'll probably only be 5 feet at the end of the next century and so forth. But if we do reproduce, and it looks like we're going to, especially when the methane under the boreal forest and the permafrost of Siberia, northern Russia, Scandinavia, and Canada and Alaska, there's apparently a lot of methane down there which may accelerate this, and that there is some concerns. But if you want to put your head in the sand like an ostrich and deny it, fine, no power, no problem. But we'll probably have them here. And also pythons. Some of these fools that bought pythons as babies, and they're so cute, and let them go after the pythons started eating their cats and their dogs and their kids, and they let them out down in Florida. We now have 100,000 Indian Burmese pythons in southern Florida. And I have worked all over the world, and I remember being in a snowstorm outside of New Delhi in January one year, and it was below freezing, and we were looking at a mound like a muskrat nest or a beaver nest, with several pythons whose body heat kept the other pythons warm, and it was covered with just a small hole, and we could see the python looking out the hole, hoping things get warm. Pythons will probably survive up here, so be glad you were born when you did, because I don't think you want to deal with pythons. And I stepped on a python once in Malaysia, and boy, did I scare the hell out of that python. This is what we call a wobbler. Those of you who are bird watchers congregate, particularly in the month of May, at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Watertown, and a tiny bit of it in Cambridge, to look at the wobblers coming north. They are retreating further north, and we're finding that the warblers that were present, say, in the coast of Maine back 80 years ago, have sort of moved further north towards the pole, and other warblers from further south are starting to move in. So the presence, the summer distribution of birds is important as a marker for climate change. But the fact that there are cardinals wintering in Maine or Ontario, and they didn't used to, does not have anything to do with climate change. It has everything to do with there being too many bird feeders. If we had a string of bird feeders every half mile between Ottawa, Canada, and Santa Claus's castle up there at the North Pole, there would be cardinals at the North Pole feeding on the handout of the sunflower seeds. And it's also invasive alien plants who are keeping mockingbirds up here where they didn't used to be, and they're non-migratory. So this is what Wellesley might look like. What's the highest point in Wellesley? In feet, does anyone know? The highest point in my town is a little under 200 feet, something like that. But this is what Wellesley could look like, not in 100 years, but within 300, 400 years, who knows, on this climate change thing. Now, what kind of bird made this? This is a beaver. We have a lady from Sherburne here who's photographing beavers. We had a nice chat beforehand about that. There were no beavers here, as I mentioned to her. In the 1950s, when I was really getting hooked on wildlife, and I should have been studying, I had to go to Peterborough, New Hampshire to find the closest beaver lodge. This was the 1950s. And since then, they've come back, mainly due to the anti-trapping law, which really allowed them to explode, because people used to trap these and sell the pelts and so forth, and they've become a bit of a nuisance. But where we now have beaver lodges in every town in Massachusetts, basically, other than maybe the Cape and the Islands, has really helped one bird, this one. Does anyone know what this is? The great blue heron, not a crane. We had a colony of 72 nests in concrete in a beaver swamp recently. And so they go in, and the beavers make these ponds. They also can live in rivers without damming up anything. But when they make these ponds, they kill the trees that are in that bit of the floodplain. And the herons only want a nest. Now, Thoreau never saw a great blue heron colony. He saw passenger pigeons, but not heron colonies. So the raccoons come up at night. A friend of mine, Mark Wilson with the Boston Globe, a photographer, a good guy, he has photographed raccoons at dusk climbing up trees to eat the eggs and the young of great blue herons at night or in the evening time. And so they need to have their trees surrounded by a foot or so of water, because raccoons don't like to swim, and they want the raccoons to not eat their young or their babies. So there's a million trees they could nest in, but they're not going to, because raccoons and maybe other small, medium-sized carnivores will go up there and be a problem. Will go after the nests, and so they need the beavers. So now we've got this huge increase in great blue herons everywhere, which is great. We also have an increase in this creature. There's still a debate on whether we had coyotes coexisting with the gray timber wolves in the 1600s when the Pilgrims came here. We don't know. Some people say we did, some say we don't. They did get exterminated, and then the ones that have come back are a little bit larger than the ones out west. So we think that some of them have red wolf, which is a very endangered species, a very long-legged wolf of the southeastern United States. And without having the larger predator above them, the wolves will keep down the numbers of coyotes. We have larger coyotes now than you will see out in Tucson or Big Bend or some other place like that. They do not do a good job in taking out enough deer. They'll get a few of them. But you can hear these at night. There's more of these around than you think. They play taps on a loudspeaker at Hanscom Air Force Base in Bedford near me, and when they play taps, all the coyotes start yapping. I've made some money on this. I said, I bet I can show you, and listen, I have some coyotes calling. Give me a couple of bucks, I'll take you there. And sure enough, the coyotes would yap away. But I've heard them at night, and particularly, you know, when the leaves are off the trees and the sound carries much further. They are around, but they're not really a danger to humans, per se. Now, who can identify this creature? Very good. Those who said fisher are correct. Those who said fisher cat should be alert to the fact that it's not a cat, it's a weasel. It should have been called the fisher weasel, but then it should not have been called the fisher in the first place. When some early zoologists were over here taking out creatures and trying to find new things to science, they saw a mink, as the story goes, a mink running along the side of a river. Minks do catch fish, they love the water. Fisher hates water, doesn't fish at all. So somebody said, hey, whoever the assistant was, go out and shoot that animal that ran down there. But they couldn't find the mink, but they did see a fisher. So they shot the fisher, and they said, here you go, boss. Here's the fisher. So they write it all up, and they presume this is the thing that fishes, but it has nothing to do with fish. There is a fisher cat baseball team up in Manchester, New Hampshire, and these are the things, when you hear something at night, sounds like someone being tortured, or two cats having a hissy fit somehow, these are the creatures that are making. When they run into each other, they will scream at each other and so forth, and they specialize in, I've only seen one, can I see hands? How many have seen a fisher in the wild? All right, how many have seen a roadkill fisher? Maybe a few more of you. I've only seen one in the wild. It's really hard to figure out. There's a lot of them out there. We figure in my town there's probably 20 fishers right now. 20. But they're really hard to see and very nocturnal. And it's really sad sometimes when you see these signs up for many weeks. Lost dog, lost cat. These guys and the coyotes. Black bears. Old Henry, he never saw a black bear here. He never saw a black bear up in Maine. Things were hunted back then. Everyone had a gun. They went wildfowling. Everything out there was either food, vermin, you had to kill it, or it's target practice. And they didn't have, you know, those little games and video games and soccer fields and stuff to do. After they did their chores at school, the kids went out and they hunted. I mean, everyone was armed to the teeth. The NRA would have loved the 1850s. Anyways, the black bear is almost gone in Massachusetts. A few survived through the years up in the Taconics and the Berkshires, and they have exploded recently. The latest estimate is that there's around 5,000 black bears in Massachusetts. 5,000! I mean, I've got several. When I've done these biodiversity days in Concord over the last several times now, we've never missed black bear and we've never missed moose. When you get a couple of hundred people shaking the bushes in town, we've never missed them. I've had a moose in my backyard. An old bullwink walked by. We have black bears now in my town. And I want to attract them to my brush pile. I have a brush pile with a tarp over it, an entranceway. So I'm thinking of getting some honey, because I need it for my yard list, and brushing some honey on all the trees around me, because they can smell it a mile away, and see if I can get a resident house. Like some people have bird houses. I'd like to have a bear house. That'd be cool. People are very interested in that. The moose. Was gone from Massachusetts. I mean, there's a lot of them here back in the Indian days. They never got all of them, and the population density was relatively small. But they have come back into Massachusetts, mainly in the last 50 years, and their numbers built up to, I think, somewhere around 900 moose. We had 6 moose wintering in Groton a few years back, and we have a few around Concord in the Estabrook Woods and so forth from time to time. And they've shown up in Chestnut Hill. I mean, they've been around a little bit. It's sort of teenage males going on walkabout, so to speak, is what we tend to see. Now, their numbers have gone up to about 900 in Massachusetts, quite a bit more up in New Hampshire and Maine, but their numbers are now starting to drop. And that is because they're walking around in these fields due to the overpopulation of white-tailed deer. Don't forget, you can have something that's too rare and it's an endangered species, and you can have something that's too common for whatever reasons, whether it's native or not native, and I call it an endangering species. I think that white-tailed deer is an endangering species. But then since they have come back in huge numbers, they have spread Lyme disease ticks, ehrlichiosis, babyosis, or a few other diseases, and it turns out that the moose are getting them, and they're dying from the same diseases. Now, when I was walking around Concord in the 1950s, I never got a tick. I didn't even know what a tick was until I went down to the coast of Rhode Island, I think Westport, Massachusetts. That's where you had ticks. We didn't have them in Wellesley, Concord, any numbers that bothered any of us. Now we do. you have to do tick checks. And so whenever I lead a nature walk around my town, young or old, well, mainly over 18, at the end of the walk, I'd like to have everyone take off their clothes, put their hands over their head, and turn around slowly so other people can see if there's any ticks on them. Well, it's the ticks that are killing. No, if anyone comes to your front door and says they're from the Lyme disease survey, don't do that, okay? Don't do that. But they are starting to die from some of the same diseases that are attacking us. But from what little I know, I don't think the white-tailed deer, even though they're carrying the ticks, I don't think it kills the deer. But it is having a major impact on the resurgence of moose populations, and now they're starting to decline pretty fast because they're like dragging a net through the woods in order to survive. So here's little Bambi, and I've always wanted to do a Bambi 2 movie on the point of view of a starving deer covered with ticks and so forth, and all the disappearing wildflowers and songbirds that used to nest in areas where the deer have overgrazed. We've now come to the point in the Quabbin Reservoir and in the Walden Woods where we've managed to set up some areas of deer-proofing fence, which is a little bit expensive, to try to allow some of our wildflowers and plants to come back, and it's partly experimental. And they're also doing this, I think, on the Middle Peninsula out in Quabbin, of trying to keep the deer the heck out of some areas because they are a plague right now. When I worked for various Republican governors, I did have their ear now and then through some contacts, and I suggested that due to the problems that the white-tailed deer overpopulation is doing to our wildflowers and butterflies, the bird habitat, and human health, that we should raise the speed limit on back roads in Massachusetts to 100 miles an hour from midnight to 5 a.m. to do something about the overpopulation of deer and the overpopulation of SUVs. But I kept getting funny looks from the governors, and it didn't pass. This is some of our tick-ridden deer. Again, Thoreau never saw a deer. Never saw a deer. I was an anti-hunter for the longest time until I got Lyme disease. And there's been a lot of suburban towns out here where mass deer service people, these are the guys that are real good sharpshooters with bows and arrows, sit up there in a tree blind and shoot down at deer, very effective. And so we're going to have to, and I know there's a controversial deer hunt down in the Blue Hills, you know, where they're trying to thin that down. It's really good for the wildflowers and the birds and the butterflies and the habitat and humans to knock down this unfortunate overpopulation of deer that we have here. Now, we used to have mountain lions, cougars, pumas. They would get some of the deer, and it would be really nice if we had these back here again. They used to be here. The last of these mountain lions were killed in the early 1800s up in Vermont and the Berkshires and the Adirondacks, but we got rid of them. There's a bounty on their head. But they really don't cause much of a problem with humans. But big cats like the mountain lion, jaguars, leopards, and so forth, if they see something running away from them, in their brain they run after it and they kill it, right? But they don't trust mushroomers and botanists who are going slow, whatever. It doesn't trigger anything. But joggers, which I consider a #1 environmental hazard at Walden Pond, damn joggers in their spandex, running around, listening to rock and roll music, out of the way, coming through, and they go around once, they go around twice, they go around 3 times. How am I supposed to lead a nature walk? But if we had mountain lions that did take care of those creatures, show-offs. We used to have wolves here, and it's called the gray wolf, the timber wolf. I don't think there's a single record of a gray or timber wolf killing a human being unless he was totally in distress out in the Great Plains and his last breaths or something like that. Not a problem, but this is what should happen to the deer here. I also suggested bringing in this endangered species known as the Siberian tiger that is adapted to our climates here in the Wellesley area. Because over where it lives in the Russian Far East, North Korea, parts of Northeast China, there's not too many left because they've killed most of the deer over there, so there's not much for them to eat. But we have a lot of deer here, and I thought it'd be really great to bring them over here. I can just imagine people going out taking pictures of the tigers running through the deer and the sugar maples. It'd be a beautiful, beautiful thing. But again, we couldn't swing it. But it is basically the saber-toothed cat we used to have here, plus it's got the stripes. But we don't have that anymore. Now we have some birds that are new here that Thoreau did not know. This is the mallard, our common duck around here. It was not common, it was accidental in the 1800s. They bred out like Manitoba West, wintered down towards Texas, and they were not an eastern bird, but they were brought into all the botanical gardens and stuff like that here. And they've totally they gang raped female black ducks in the spring, basically. And so we had this hybrid population of part black duck, part mallards, which is now becoming like pure mallards here. And the true black ducks nest only up in the Maritimes pretty much. And we get them here in the fall, winter, and spring, a few of them. But this is our basic duck, not native to Massachusetts. This creature, oh my God, I hate this thing. This is from the old world. It does not belong here. It is totally intolerant of other waterfowl anywhere near it. Attacks humans and pets and dogs and so forth. Is eutrophying a lot of our ponds. It's not a protected species because it doesn't belong here whatsoever. And so the Fish and Wildlife people do shake the eggs and whatever as best they can to keep the numbers down. And I can't wait until spring so I can go on a swan boat ride in the public gardens next May. My special memories. Pigeons. Again, not native here, brought over. A bit of a problem in the city. They don't tend to come to the bird feeders out here in Wellesley and Concord too much, but they are a problem. When I used to work for Mass Audubon, from, when was that, the late 60s to the early 80s, we had this thing at our annual meetings like Audubon A. So someone who's done a great job in conservation, helping birds or nature or something like that. And at the time, for a while, I was living in Boston. And I'd have lunch occasionally, and I'd go to the public garden and the common, and there was a wonderful Italian lady on a bench feeding the pigeons. And I'd watch her, and the pigeons would come closer, and then she'd put the seed up right on the bench, and then she'd look around, grab one of the pigeons, stuff it in a cloth bag, and go down and have squab for dinner. And I saw this several times. I did try to nominate her for Audubon A award. It didn't happen. The starling, there was a process of bringing over the birds of Shakespeare to the New World. Misguided. The starling is a major problem. Numbers seem to be going down a little bit, and I don't really know why. And I wonder if there aren't some chemicals in Oriental bittersweet fruits, which they really are not used to digesting or something. But they take over the nest of all sorts of hole-nesting birds and birdhouses, as does this house sparrow, which has been nicknamed the limey because it used to be called the English sparrow. It's actually from India originally. And what they do is when they see anyone who puts out birdhouses for this Native American tree swallow that eats so many mosquitoes, or the Native American eastern bluebird, if the starling or house sparrow wants to take over that nest, which they do regularly, they will come in and they'll kill the baby tree swallows or the baby bluebirds and throw them out of the nest. If there's a female or a male sitting on the unhatched eggs or the very young, they will peck on the head until they break through the cranium, and they'll take the corpse of that bluebird or tree swallow and throw it on the ground. And I know people that are raising both of these tree swallows and bluebirds, and they'll come over and say, Peter, come over, check this out. And there will be a dead bluebird covered with ants or babies on the ground. So if you don't have a birdhouse which you can open up and reach in and you can't squeeze a sitting house sparrow or have a heart trap and catch it, you should not be allowed to have a birdhouse because all you're doing is raising more competition. It'll kill off more of the bluebirds and more of the tree swallows, which are, they need a lot of work. Some people just can't do that. This is my backyard on a normal winter day, which we may never see again. Who knows? Boy, it's amazing today. I went out in a Hawaiian shirt today and shorts. It's got up to 60 in Concord. Now, Thoreau, Emerson et al. Never fed birds. And feeding birds is a new thing. And it sort of took off in the 1950s and so forth, but very, very few people, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar business. But my father and stepmother did feed birds. I got hooked on birds because of bird feedings. Back when the evening grosbeaks came in, these beautiful yellow birds from up north, it helped seeing them so close. But there are some problems with bird feeding. One problem with bird feeding is sometimes you get a rare bird shows up. This was a feeder just north side of Boston in a relatively poor neighborhood, and it had this pretty bird in March, a painted bunting. And people really excited about seeing this. There is something called the Brookline Bird Club, and some people want to keep track of how many birds they see this year in Massachusetts or in their life. And boy, the word got out. There was 100 people, and there were some recent immigrants from El Salvador living in this house. And they had some, I think it was in part of Malden or something, and there were some rhododendron bushes and some privets or whatever around. And all these people showed up at dawn to see the bird. A few of them saw it, and then it dove in his bushes near the house. And I didn't get there until, I don't know, noon or something. I'm a crepuscular bird, or I specialize in the evening birds. And so I get there, and I said, the painted bunting's still here. There's 150 people standing around this one house, you know, that had a little fence, a chain link fence. And I saw somebody opening a little shade now and then, seeing what's happening. And there's all these people with telescopes and binoculars and cameras. It looked like a raid from the DEA or the Border Patrol or something. They were sweating bullets inside. So they said, well, the bird went in those bushes. We haven't seen it go out for 5 hours or 4 hours. And I said, well, let me do something very old-fashioned, because I'm a Luddite. And I went, psh, 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 psh. It's a noise that bird watchers make when they're frustrated and there's nothing to look at. Up pops the painted bunting. Everybody saw it. Everyone was gone in about a minute. You know, check it off, gone. And then I decided to talk to the people at the front door and explain what we were doing. And they didn't know there was some bird thing going on. So be careful if you tell people about where a rare bird is, because you might have some visitors. This is the basement of the Massachusetts Audubon Society gift shop out in Lincoln, from the amount of gold they make selling bird feeders and bird seed. Because they know if you have a bird feeder and bird seed, you're pretty likely to join the Audubon eventually. And so these are gold bars. This is not my basement. This is the multi-billion-dollar industry. This is actually photographed in Johannesburg, South Africa. And they told me if I could go in and I wanted to take one of these bricks of gold, I could do it. And you see on TV or old westerns or whatever, gold, right? Where they have something that they just lift. You cannot lift a brick of gold. I mean, it is like 2,000 pounds. It is so dense. So they certainly said, oh, there's some gold bars here. Have one, have one. That is BS. All right, so here's our friend, the cardinal. There was no cardinal in Massachusetts. They occurred, you know, mainly, I don't know, well, in the early 1800s, it made it up to the west side of the Hudson near New York City, but it's basically a southern bird. And we do have a problem now. You know, there was a civil war back in, just after Thoreau died in the 1860s, of the South versus the North. The war between the states. And it's interesting that the school children in the early 1900s had elections, state by state, to have a state bird. Ours is the chickadee, and, you know, various states have roadrunner or whatever. But down south, they decided to, they love the mockingbird, they love the cardinal, they love the flicker, and they love the Baltimore Oriole and whatever. And so all the states from Mason-Dixon line all the way to Texas, every state bird now has a modifier. Because if there's more than one bird called a hawk, each one has to have a name. If there's more than one kind of warbler, more than one kind of sparrow, you've got to have a name for it, a modifier. So all the people live down south. Their state bird is the northern mockingbird, because there's a whole other bunch of mockingbirds in Latin America, or it's the northern flicker, or it's the northern cardinal, because there's a whole bunch of other cardinals down south. And I can't believe that all these birders down in Dixie don't get upset about this. Half the birds they see are the northern this and the northern that. And they haven't brought it up. But maybe I should go shake some bushes down there. But they do not migrate. If you have cardinals, the young of those cardinals only go about a mile until they find the next bird feeder. But they're permanent residents, and they're the last bird to come to your feeder at night. And they have big, dark eyes for light gathering, because they often are going down in the underbrush in relatively low light conditions and shrubbery. But it's not a native bird to Massachusetts. And if we banned all bird feeding, and there are some reasons to do that. I do give a whole talk on why we should ban bird feeding, tongue-in-cheek, and even the Audubon Society's paid me to give that talk, but never twice. I must mention that the Humane Society of Massachusetts had me do an annual meeting, dinner speaker, keynote speaker, and I'm telling about why we should kill all the deer and whatever. They never invited me back. But this evening grosbeak, it used to be common here. It's a eruptive species from the North Woods. It eats spruce budworm caterpillars and feeds its babies with that, even though it eats seeds the rest of the year. One interesting factor to think, in case you or any of your children or siblings are thinking of becoming a vegan, there is no vegan songbird babies. None. They all get animal matter, dead spiders, caterpillars, grubs, moths, whatever they can find. Because when you're a growing person or growing bird in a nest, you need animal protein. Even if the rest of your life you're eating seeds or fruits or whatever, whatever that bird does, when the babies are growing for those 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, they only get animal food. There is no vegan songbirds. And being a vegan, and I know some of you are, it's your choice, whatever, that is denying your evolutionary heritage. When you look at the bonobos and you look at the chimpanzees and understand that we are primates and so forth, we have the dentition in the stomach where we're supposed to eat meat and we're supposed to eat vegetables and nuts and green. We're supposed to be both carnivorous and herbivorous. And to not do that is denying your evolutionary heritage, which most people do anyway, so who cares? Be a vegan. More meat for me. Summertime bird feeding, I don't have a problem with. Wintertime bird feeding, I do have a bit of a problem with. But in the summertime, there's a lot of really colorful birds that might come to your feed. A lot of people stop feeding in the summertime. Well, the summertime is when you can get indigo buntings, and sometimes get rose-breasted grosbeaks, scarlet tanagers, and goldfinches when they're gold. That's fine. And another reason to have a bird feeder are cats. Cats, we now, the latest revised estimate is that house cats, feral cats, loved cats, as well as ones that are just sort of discarded, eat 5 billion Native American songbirds every year. 5 billion disappear just due to people putting a little cat out, and they come back for the fancy feast, and they kill all these birds. I had an avian Serengeti back when I was feeding birds, and then I stopped. I mean, it'd be a pile of mourning dove feathers, cardinal feathers. Oh, never a house sparrow, never a starling, because they grew up with that wild cat, the house cat. They have lookouts. It's like the mafia, Hey, watch out, there's a cat coming, they're gone. American birds, they didn't grow up with this kind of predator or the density of these. So they're a real problem. But the bird feeders have helped this bird, the Cooper's hawk. They've come back big. People used to shoot hawks and hang them up on fence wires back when we were more farm-oriented peoples and so forth. But they've come back big time, and they strategize. There's the bird feeder. There's the nearest bush. There's the nearest tree. What angle? Where's the light? It's like designing a football play. It's like Bill Belichick working on what's going to happen without Gronk. Another thing to have a bird feeder with, another plus, is to have this delightful creature, the gray squirrel, which people really like gray squirrels. They are like having little monkeys. They're sort of like a little tamarin marmoset, small primate, running around, brilliant creatures. I think we should paint them like, pink, another one green, and so forth, find out who's doing what, and so forth. But they eat the majority of the seed that you put out there. Some of you may have some neighbors that are sort of uppity, nose in the air because of the quality of their bird feeder, and all the beautiful birds that come to their feeder. So I've invented a bird-proof squirrel feeder, where if a bird lights on it, they see all these seeds in the glass there, but they're too lightweight, it doesn't open. So they go elsewhere. Then when a big fat squirrel comes in, it opens up and eat all they want. When the squirrel leaves, the birds come back, but they can't get in. And that is for the people who live next door to the uppity people of the bird feeders. Red-tailed hawks, they've gotten really common. We have about 60 of them in our Concord Christmas bird count because we have so many birders there. In just my town, we have 20 parties. We have 14 towns in our count circle. So if we get a sunny day and a thermal comes up, David Sibley's here, Dick Walton's here, and all those famous birders around, I can get 5 or 6 different parties checking off that same one red-tailed hawk. So we lead the nation on the numbers of a lot of our birds, just because we count them many, many times. Now, a few birds have come up from the south. Now, these are things that people think sort of indicate global warming from the bird point of view. Does anyone know what this bird is with the brilliant white belly? Red-bellied woodpecker, exactly. Remember, most birds are named after their least conspicuous or non-existent field marks. And that's the case in this one. It's a tiny pink feather between the legs, but you never see it because it's always plastered against a tree. Now, that survives somewhat on its own up here, particularly people who have suet feeders. But that's a bird that's not really feeder dependent as much as some of the others in the wintertime. This one is pretty feeder dependent in the wintertime. It again used to occur from like Princeton, New Jersey south. It was never in New England, even in Henry Thoreau's day. Does anyone know what it is? tufted titmouse. And when I lead nature walks, especially with kids in my town, when I hear a tufted titmouse, I go, stop, stop. I hear the nightingale of New England. The kids are expecting something really fantastic, and out comes the song going, Peter, Peter, Peter. And finally they connect that with my name, and then they understand it. So that's one of my favorite birds. And they're everywhere. Now, they were not in New England in the 1850s or anywhere before. We now lead the nation. Our Concord Christmas count, which is Lincoln, Framingham, a little bit of Weston, Wayland, and further west out towards Stowe. It's a 15-mile diameter circle. We lead the nation on the number of tufted titmice. It's not even native up here. It has come in from the south. We lead the nation in the numbers of those, with all the bird feeders that we have out there to help them out. Does anyone know what this is? Carolina wren. Very good. Says tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, or something similar to that. Also, we changing the rendition to cheeseburger, cheeseburger, cheeseburger. They see other creatures eating. They're not vegans normally, even part-time. They want to find insects and spiders. So when we have a really deep snow, they get knocked back somewhat, as we did several years ago. But they're still around. And they recolonize when we get winters that are not so severe. But if you want to attract birds, you get this. Not seeds. You want mealyworms, dead or alive. Look into it. That is the best bang for your buck on birds. You can get bluebirds eating out of your hand, or Carolina wrens, training them on mealyworms. And they are available. Another thing that is attracted to bird feeders are white-footed mice. Most people care so much about their birds that they put out the seed in the evening on the ground and in their feeders, so the birds will have it when they wake up. That is really dumb, because most of that gets eaten, anything accessible, by the white-footed mice. I used to have these in my house, huge numbers, in the basement, which I call the spider sanctuary, and the garage. And then one day I stopped feeding birds. And the number of dead mice I found and remains of the mice when I cleaned up the house was incredible. And the reason I stopped feeding birds was the 2004 World Series of the Red Sox versus the Cardinals. I'm a bird guy. I like Cardinals, but I like the Red Sox. But I did not want to aid and abet the enemy, so I stopped feeding the Cardinals. I had 7 Cardinals coming to my feeder that October, and I stopped feeding them. And the Red Sox won in 4 straight, thanks to me. Now we also have rats. This is the brown rat. There's also something called black rat. It is from India. Both of these, the black rat caused the earliest plagues when it got up into Europe by way of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, etc. The black rat, and then followed later by the brown rat. They're both from India. And why is this called the Norway rat? Because of prejudice. You know how the Red Sox fans used to hate the Yankees fans and stuff like that, and the Northern Irish don't like the Southern Irish, blah, blah, blah. Well, Linnaeus was from Uppsala in Sweden, and the Swedes didn't like the Norwegians, their neighbors, right? He had black rats and brown rats running all over Uppsala, all over. And so he just said, oh, wait a second, I hate the Norwegians. So he had a speaking gig over in Oslo. He goes over to Oslo, sets a trap, grabs a brown rat, kills it, describes it in the scientific literature, Rattus norvegicus. He's going, and then we go Norway rat. There's nothing to do with Norway. It's from India, and some Swede having a problem with the Norwegians. The only bird that has really not altered its migration completely, it seems, is this. In Thoreau's day, the mourning dove used to breed up here, and they would be gone for the winter. What the heck's a mourning dove? It eats grains and grass seeds and stuff. Mainly, it's not a fruit eater. What's it going to do up here in the wintertime? Nothing. So they all went down to Alabama, Georgia, or South Carolina for the winter, and they would come back in April. And that's what they did. But with bird feed, with all the little seed that people are putting out, now the mourning dove has so many bird feeders in so many towns throughout the Northeast, there's no reason to fly down there to Georgia and get shot at and waste all that energy flying over the New Jersey Turnpike. So they don't migrate anymore. They don't migrate. And an interesting fact on mourning doves is that they have, most birds have, well, we're talking songbirds, they have a call that they give all year long, 12 months a year, contact between the mates and the females or buddies or whatever. But the song is a territorial thing that they only give, you know, in February, March, and some of the birds that are resident here like house finches, and then when the others come back in April and particularly May, they have a song. And they stop singing that song in late summer when they're sick of feeding the kids, there's abundance of food, they're molting, they have a headache. They don't sing in the fall. A few shadow songs. But the mourning dove among our land birds is the only one that has a song, which is coo, 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 coo. And that's the first owl most people ever hear. They go looking for the owl and only see mourning doves. Where do they get owl go? But their call is made with their wings. When the mourning dove flies off, you will hear it. And that is their call, saying, get the hell out of here. But it has no sort of call, no vocal call most of the year. The peregrine falcon is doing real well now, almost too many. We had a big problem with something called DDT and some similar chemicals. And fortunately, Rachel Carson got in that and saved the human race, as well as a lot of these big birds and things at the top of the food chain. And so we banned DDT in the U.S., but it's still made in the U.S. and sold in other countries, unfortunately, to a lesser degree. It really helped the peregrine come back, and so they've had foster parents, they put them up on bridges and hotels, really worked very hard on the peregrines. And now that we've gotten rid of most of the DDT up here, they're doing really well. The problem is, they're now endangering. They're so darn common. They were endangered 20 years ago, but then threatened and whatever. Every single natural gas and oil platform out in the Gulf of Mexico, and every cruise ship that I work on when I go between Cuba and the Yucatan and along the coast of Central America, or even in the Pacific, have peregrines. We have peregrines on the ship, and almost every one of them, in season, when the migration over the Gulf of Mexico is taking place, there's peregrines sitting on every one of them. And when some of those birds are coming back and they're tired, they've got a headwind, they've got rain, they're wet, they're heavy, and they suddenly see, where there were no islands, they now see lights, and they see a place they can rest. And this peregrine sitting on almost every one of them, watching this bird flying into the wind, flying into the wind. The peregrine's going, oh, God, I have to kill something else. And then as this poor bird finally is reaching some place to rest, boom, there goes the peregrine and nails it. And I know somebody had bandits, or drawn blood from 600 peregrines down at Block Island and Cape May. And that's how many just one guy was able to trap. Another bird that we've had that's come back great, and again, Henry never saw this bird. It was extinct in Massachusetts and Catskills back in the earliest 1800s, with the last few. And a few of them survived on an Indian reservation, what became an Indian reservation, beyond Jamestown, New York, the Allegheny Indian Reservation, I think it's called. And so they brought in some of these, Mass Wildlife people did, a guy named Jim Cardosa, out in the Quabbin area, and the Taconics and the Berkshires, and they did really well. They were gone for almost 150 years, and they've done really well, except for the big males that get out in the middle of 128 in May and fluff up and try to mate with a Mack truck or something. It doesn't work very well. But we have lots of them, and but the game birds are completely flipped in just my short lifetime. When I was attempting to grow up unsuccessfully, we had ruffed grouse in the woods in the apple orchards around Concord, quite a few ruffed grouse. In our Christmas bird count in 1960, we had 30 or 40 ruffed grouse. No turkeys. And we had maybe 200 pheasants, the ringneck pheasants. Any of you have been living in the Northeast here 50 years, you remember there were ringneck pheasants on the lawns, you could hear them, they were everywhere. They have vanished. There's no more pheasants. Ruffed grouse have vanished. I don't know if it's coyotes or fishers and all these medium-sized carnivores with great senses of smell that can pick out the nest of a bird on the ground. Ruffed grouse have virtually vanished from eastern Massachusetts, virtually. We have not had a ruffed grouse on our Christmas bird count for like 5 or 6 years. But wild turkeys are doing great. We get hundreds of wild turkeys now. We'll probably lead the nation in the number of turkeys pretty soon. And part of the reason is they spend the night up in trees. They get way up in the trees, whereas the ruffed grouse would, I think, rest on a log or something like that. The pheasants never get in a tree. So the carnivores can get them at night, But the turkeys have a gang mentality, and they roost at night in safety up in a tree, and so they're doing very, very well, which is nice to see. This is a bald eagle, of course, which we almost lost. I call it the white-headed fishing vulture. They're doing okay. But they're almost, again, they were endangered, then threatened, again with the DDT issue here. But now they're getting to be a nuisance. In the Alaskan area, British Columbia, and Pacific Northwest, there are so many bald eagles now that when the salmon aren't running, they're going into great blue heron colonies, tufted puffin colonies, and they're a very capable predator when they want to be. And they're becoming a nuisance. We may have to knock back the bald eagle in some places. Now here we're trying to bring them back in the Northeast. We do have a wonderful census run by Mass Wildlife on wintering bald eagles. We're very up on their nests. There's a nest in Southborough, there's a nest in Lunenburg, there's a nest but no babies in Concord. Lakeville has them. If you want to see bald eagles in the wintertime, you go out to the Quabbin Reservoir. They feed on the deer that the coyotes chase out of the snowdrifts when they have snowdrifts, or when it's flat ice, the deer hooves kind of splay out, they break their shoulders, in comes the eagles, in comes the coyotes. Also, the Merrimack River is quite good for them, anywhere from Lowell, particularly down around Amesbury, Newburyport, if you want to see a bald eagle. And they do come to the Mystic Lakes now and then, and they're getting commoner and commoner. We get them in the Sudbury Valley, coming north and south there. So the bird is coming back. It is a symbol of the United States, but it is, it's something that we've worried about. We've brought them back, and now we're getting to the point we may have too many in a few areas. But I think I've probably gone on too long. I do have some stuff on invasive plants, but I know we have to be out of here. If anyone has to go do something, if I can just get another 10 minutes here for a quick overview on some plant things, stay with us. Because there's nothing good on TV anymore, you know that, right? The Red Sox are not on. So this is just a little overview on just some of the invasive plants and the creatures that have been modified by that. This is an American flag. What country was it made in? China. Ask Donald, I'm trying. Anyway, so most of our invasive plants, just a quick overview, come from an area with the same climate that we have, which is miserable springs, followed by miserable summers, followed by miserable autumns, followed by miserable winters. Same climate, that's North Korea, Northeast China, the Russian Far East, and the northern half of Japan, Sakhalin, Hokkaido. All 80–90% of all of our problem plants come from that area where they're pre-adapted to our miserable climate here in the Northeast. This is a picture taken in Concord. Everything you see there is from Asia. On the foreground, Japanese knotweed, background, Oriental bittersweet, killing our native elms and black cherries. The same exact spot in Concord. Thora would throw up if he saw this. Sugar maples, which are native. We like the sugar maples. Airy. Sunlight can get through them, so wildflowers can grow on the ground underneath them. Unlike the very dark shade of the Norway maple or common street tree in New England. And this is the ailanthus, this is a tree of heaven. Which is all over, 128 and so forth. This is the Baltimore Oriole that eats our fruits. And one of our problems with the flowering plants is in May, when they come back, they want to stick their face into flowers. But if we have, and I'm getting it more and more, when we get these really hot days in March and early April, some of these trees that are very temperature sensitive pop out into flower much, much earlier than they used to. And so by the time the Baltimore Orioles come back, around May 10th and so forth, there's often no more flowers left for them to get their nectar and the insects attracted to those flowers. So they're having some problems with that. This is a scarlet tanager bird I was about to write a book about. Every one of them winters south of the equator. How many in this room have seen a scarlet tanager? Not a cardinal, but just a few of you. I mean, you have probably 50 pairs in Wellesley. I think we have 200 pairs in Concord in our woods, but they stay way up in the trees. They don't come to the bird feeders except in a stress time in May, occasionally, and so forth. And then they fly all the way to eastern Ecuador, eastern Peru, and the Amazon, flying over the Andes, on average, maybe 20 times in their lifetime. No GPS, no American Express card, no one telling them what to do, and they're overflying other patches or remnant tropical forests in Panama and Costa Rica. They don't stop there, they keep going. There's no record of scarlet tanager on a Christmas bird count ever. Pileated woodpecker has come back very strongly, which is nice. There was also another thing that Thoreau never saw, but they've come back mainly because we don't have every kid running around with a shotgun anymore. And they used to pop everything, just for the hell of it. We have no problem with some things that are brought over here. Only some of the things brought in from other continents. The people at the Arnold Arboretum, Brooklyn and Missouri Botanical Gardens, would run around all over the world trying to see what they could bring back that would be good for horticulture, for the garden centers to sell, that the people that are members of the garden club or care about gardening would buy. And a lot of them are missing something in the reproduction. You will never see a lilac or a forsythia unless it was planted by a man or a woman. There's something missing there. But some things have fruits and whatever. a complete life cycle, and they're a problem. This is multiflora rose, again from China, in that area. And that's the only reason we have mockingbirds here. There was no mockingbirds here, and they're non-migratory. If the mockingbird has some babies, those babies will try to find a mate and a place to live within a mile of where they were born. So it's very incremental. They don't do any migration whatsoever. And for all you people down in Alabama, this is a northern mockingbird. Northern mockingbird. Another bird that spreads our fruits, unfortunately, is the cedar waxwing. See those little red spots on the wing. Very gentle bird, very calm, like a bluebird, no loud calls and so forth. And they're unfortunately spreading a lot of these fruits, and it's mainly fruits, these fruit-eating birds. It's catbirds, cedar waxwings, starlings are spreading these things, bluebirds, robins are a big consumer of multiflora rose and other kinds of things. They don't like this stuff. This is barberry. It tastes like wet toilet paper, Kleenex. You know, burning bush, very pretty. The gardeners love it. Banned in Massachusetts. And this is, you know, every box store has to have a row of this stuff around here. But it has those little fruits that the birds eat in September. And in certain soils, when they poop that seed out, burning bush are quite a problem. This is a bigger problem. The honeysuckles, again, from Northeast Asia. This is the first fruit that comes out in July. Because it takes a while. Remember, you have your flowers, and then they got to go through some stuff, and then gradually the fruits come out. But it's the first fruit. And these leaves on these invasive plants come in to leaf earlier in the spring, shading out other wildflowers, stay in leaf much later. And this is the catbird that spreads all of those fruits left and right. It's not a very pretty bird necessarily. These are starlings feeding on autumn olive berries, or fruits technically, down at the Split and Braintree. And this is right along 128, not far from here. Everything you see with those yellow leaves is all Oriental bittersweet. Not a fun thing. I was looking to move away from Concord. I didn't have much money, so I was looking for a place much cheaper to live. And I saw an ad for a place that says, sort of run down, needs a gardener's touch. It was out in the southern Berkshires. And I got out there and checked this house out, and I decided not to get it. That's all Oriental bittersweet. This is a wreath for sale. This is banned in Massachusetts recently. Not that anybody enforces it, but you can still buy it. I'd say $20 for that wreath. I was at a garden club, and all the decorations were Oriental bittersweet, the whole thing. And this is just a tree full of it. I was talking to this lady who has a TV show and whatever at the time about Oriental bittersweet and all this stuff. And Martha said, well, geez, why don't you come down to New York? We'll talk. Maybe we should do a show on, back when she was on regular TV, on invasive alien plants escaping from your garden or attacking your garden. And I almost got into business with her, but then she became a felon and I decided it was not a good idea. There's an American robin, and they are major fruit eaters, and so sometimes tongue-in-cheek, I suggest we really could arm the teenagers and kill all the robins, the bluebirds, the cedar waxwings, and stop the spread of these invasive plants. This is what some of it looks like. This is, I think, mile-a-minute vine. And this is black swallowwort. Birds aren't too involved with this, but it is around. And apparently the monarch butterflies, which are decreasing wildly, when they nectar, if the monarchs come here, it's in the milkweed family, and they'll sometimes lay their eggs on these leaves, but the caterpillars die. And as this stuff gets more common, it's affecting the monarchs negatively. This is mile-a-minute vine down by the 128 railroad station in Westwood. It has fruits that the birds eat. Again from Northeast Asia, and it was quite a problem. We were about to flame this out. This was the first foothold of this very dangerous plant from the Far East. It's a thorny vine with edible fruits, and we were about to get flamethrowers and do something with this, and somebody found a blanding turtle there. Blanding's turtles are endangered in Massachusetts, but not in Wisconsin or Minnesota and other places where they belong. It's a glacial relic here. So a lot of people are putting a lot of attention into protecting the Blanding's turtle. Well, because we have the Blanding's turtle there, it's an endangered species, okay, well, we're not going to do anything about the mile-a-minute, which is now spreading into the Blue Hills. The concept here I want to make is that everything is endangered at the edge of its range, whatever its toleration of various climates and water and regimens and whatever and elevation. I was on Ellesmere Island, and I saw an area with a lot of wildflowers. This is way, way up north, 80 degrees, almost 90 degrees north. And near this one little village, the only village in Ellesmere Island, I said, can we go over there? That looks really interesting. No, you can't go there. The Canadian Wildlife Authorities and the Nature Federation. It's the only place dandelions occur in Ellesmere Island, and no, you can't go there. Well, if dandelions are endangered somewhere, everything is endangered at the edge of its range. All right, it's a philosophical problem. Do we spend $10 million protecting a Blanding's turtle here, where it's very common elsewhere? There's a million of them, so to speak, somewhere else. Why are we investing that much money protecting a relic population that's not the last in the world? I don't know, it's a philosophical problem. This is 5 miles from here, and I bet nobody knows what it is. Elliott Street, right near the big bridge that goes over the Charles River, kudzu. Kudzu growing here on the Needham, Wellesley, Newton border. The homeowner there did not want us to do anything with it, but eventually we convinced the homeowner that we'd like to get rid of it. It was coming into flower and seed. Kudzu. Any of you been down south, you know what this stuff is. Where is it from? Northeast Asia, similar climate, pre-adapted. And we finally did get rid of it. Garlic mustard that some of you love, poor man's pesto, and this sterilizes the soil. It's a 2-year plant. This is the 2nd year. First year, it just looks like a big violet on steroids. And we've had a lot of pulls trying to get rid of this stuff. There was 5 spots in the state of Maine with this stuff, and all of them were at parking lots where people from New Jersey and Massachusetts, where the stuff was common, would get out and take a picture. And in their sneakers would be some dirt, and in that dirt would be some seeds of the garlic mustard. But all 5 sites were brought up by tourists from other places. Anyone know what this is? Japanese knotweed. Yeah, badass stuff. That's a worldwide problem, all over Europe now. And we'll get into this stilt grass. Beautiful picture. Every year I see people out there painting this purple loosestrife out in Niagara Corner in Concord and so forth. But we now have some beetles and weevils which are attacking this, and we bring this down to just 10% infestation. Then the marsh grasses and the cattails and other things come back, and a lot of the wildlife and bird life that we want from our freshwater marshes does come back with this, bringing this stuff in. This is actually from Europe. Phragmites, which I see increasing heavily right now. Some of these things are, increasing much faster than others. I'm worried about Phragmites, taking out the waterways for things like the wood duck that we like so much. This is a big problem. When I drink the tap water in Concord, since we're not allowed to have these little Poland Spring things, you can't sell this in Concord. It's banned. You can taste the poop of the Canada geese and spend the night on the reservoir we get our drinking water from. But they are a big problem. When Henry was here, occasionally there'd be V's of geese way up high, headed to Maryland, North Carolina, relatively uncommon. They're now extremely common, as you all know. The police hate them. They cause so many accidents. Golf course managers hate them. They leave something called land mines on the greens, so forth. I mean, I was driving with E.O. Wilson, the professor at Harvard, and David Sibley, the great bird artist from Concord, and myself, out to some event. And suddenly, all the cars on Route 2 were going off the road. We're headed out to the Harvard Forest in Peterson. And I had to go off the road. And I asked, Ed, you okay? David, you okay? Fine, yeah, what the hell happened? I don't know, all these cars full of little leaguers and soccer players on a Saturday morning early, suddenly went off the road, hit their brakes. There was a Canada goose walking across the road with a few of its little yellow babies, right? We didn't want to kill the Canada geese. But we almost killed 20 soccer players, as well as a couple of famous scientists and artists, just for the Canada geese. Water chestnut, big problem in some areas. First noticed in Concord, Mass, in the New World as an escapee in Thoreau's day, actually. We're still battling it. A great horned owl means it's nighttime, symbol of wisdom and so forth. They're doing fine. The owls seem to be doing quite well here, the bird, the screech, and the great horned owls in particular. Not so much the open country owls, like short-eared owls that used to nest in Massachusetts, are disappearing, as the northern harrier as well. And so back when we did slideshows, you had to end with a sunset. It was mandatory. And that's when you elbow the person next to you saying, hey, that fool's about to shut up, they're ready to clap. Okay? So this just walled in at sunset. So I hope I've challenged some cherished beliefs of yours. And if not, I hope I've entertained you. And if any of you are interested, we do have discounted copies of the Field Guide to New England, and also a great deal on fabulous binoculars. Wide-angle close focusing, and waterproof, and so forth. So do stop by the table afterwards, and I'd be happy to answer any intelligent questions, queries, or comments for just a couple of minutes. Any hands come up? Yes, go ahead.
Last summer I saw, which is what I thought was a cat, but it really wasn't. It turned out to be a bobcat.
Oh, they're increasing here. You don't see them much, but you're lucky to see one.
Yeah, Tom said you're so lucky to see it, because usually they don't like to be seen, but, so there are quite...
Mainly nocturnal, except in areas where they're not hunted and trapped. I mean, if you go to Yosemite, you stay at the Alwani Hotel, of course, they'll just walk right by you during the bobcats in the daytime, because there's been no hunting for 100 years in Yosemite. Where in other areas, a lot of creatures become nocturnal because they're shot at in the daytime.
Yeah.
They're capable of being both.
This was in the evening that I saw it, kind of, but I...
Yeah, when we have camera traps set up, so when something crosses by, a laser beam sets off the camera, we do have a lot of photographs now, and it is increasing the bobcat, but very hard to see. But you're lucky to see them. But mountain lions, even if you do see a mountain lion, I recommend don't tell anybody, because they're going to put you down in Bridgewater. I mean, Mass Wildlife and the federal government does not want to have the eastern race of the cougar become an endangered subspecies, and we have to set aside land for it. Just be quiet. Don't tell anybody. Tell us the newspaper you're with, ma'am. Wait, anybody got that? You're all subscribers that live in Wellesley? Oh man, 100% subscriber rate. That's great.
I just wanted to know what you see as the biggest local contribution to negative impact in our town. What is the main thing that you think is negatively impacting the flora, fauna, around?
Well, to me, white-tailed deer is the number one. Not that I hate deer, but there's just way too many of them, and nothing is knocking their numbers down. So I find that's the best thing I could do.
What about our human impact around here? What is
There's got to be there's vast areas of this planet where nobody lives. I mean, I know we got. I mean, because we're near high-paying jobs, and we have transportation that works sometimes, except for 128 and the Mass Pike and the trains and so forth. There's got to be people. So I don't worry about this. There's plenty of space. But white-tailed deer is a big, big problem. And the garden club people don't like them either. They love hostas and stuff like that. But I'd say that's sort of the number one issue right now. Okay.
I see the beginning of Phragmites.
Oh, yeah, it's really hard. You have to go into each Phragmites thing with a little dropper to put some herbicide in, and because it grows mainly in wetlands, there's all sorts of laws that are much more restrictive in wetlands than in forest. And so it's a real problem. And unfortunately, we have a native species in the same genus of Phragmites, a native one that's quite rare and local, which is a bit of a problem. So it's not an easy fix. I don't know what we can do on Phragmites, and it is starting to take over a lot of areas. It used to just be at the upper edge of the salt marshes, but now I see it. If you go up to visit, Williamstown or North Adams, the art museums are and whatever, you'll see it growing right up, way up, just little roadside ditches, way up in the Berkshires.
It will outcompete the cattail.
Oh yeah, I've been watching a pond in Bedford, which used to be all cattails. On the road to Carlisle. And then purple loosestrife came in, and the whole thing became purple loosestrife pretty much, very few cattails, and then Phragmites came in, killed all the loosestrife and the cattails. And the cattails, there's a whole lot of our creatures and birds that survive on cattails are good, but Phragmites is relatively useless. Birds will use it as a roosting place, but it's sterile here. But not sterile where it belongs. In the old world, there's all kinds of creatures adapted to the Phragmites over there. But not here. Yes, sir.
The Oriental bittersweet seems to be taking over here. What keeps it in check in Manchuria?
That's what we'd like to know more of. I mean, we have been successful in finding some biological controls, but some of them get out of whack and start eating other things. And we do have a Native American bittersweet, actually. You'll see a lot of streets were named Bittersweet Lane before we ever had Oriental bittersweet. But we still need more scientists, but then the federal government doesn't want to give any money to science anymore. They want to close down the National Science Foundation, and the new administration, God knows what they're going to do with anything useful as far as the environment goes. So I don't really know what keeps it in check over there. But when we had the gypsy moth, big issue, and Mass Wildlife Magazine's got a great article on gypsy moth and all the truths about it right now. But when we brought over some parasitic wasps and flies to deal with the gypsy moth caterpillars, what happens is they ate a lot of them, knocked their numbers way down, but then they started attacking all the big moths. We used to have Io moths, Cecropia moths, a group called Saturnid moths, which the whippoorwills used to eat. So now, since we semi-solved briefly the gypsy moth problem, bringing in these predators from other seas, we've wiped out all of our big moths and we've wiped out the whippoorwills. So, we'd like a quick, easy, clean fix, but, often down the road it didn't work that well. One more hand and then, yes?
What do you know about bishop weed and its origin?
Goutweed?
Yes, also called gout.
Yeah, goutweed. It has white edges. I don't know why the ladies in the garden club, and they're 99% ladies, want plants with white edges. I don't know what the hell. It doesn't seem natural to me. But they have white edges. And that stuff sends runners underground. They can send runners completely under a highway and up the other side. And it also comes out so it doesn't have white edges. I mean, it's just sort of another green weed. But it does spread like a cancer out there. I mean, I didn't have to bring it up in that short coverage there, but it is a problem. Bishop's weed or gout's weed.
It took over my Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
so they did battle in it, and the Pakistan lost.
A friend of mine who works in New York City Parks and Recreation is using some invasives to fight other invasives. So they may have a Norway maple forest there with very dense shade and nothing grows under, basically. And they keep it there so that other invasives don't come in. So it's an issue. But it was not an issue in Henry's day. I mean, all of our problems then were agricultural field weeds, herbaceous field weeds, we thought, and hand-pulled and whatever, before we got the chemistry industry involved. Okay, you're welcome to come up and look through these binoculars, look at some books, or go home, whatever.